Thank you very much.
No, absolute pleasure. Right, I'm just gonna, one sec, cool. Yeah, this is a track called Runaway. This road keeps on coming, constant beats are a drumming. We're in line. These armies of a shaking, heavy hearts say you're mistaken. I would live without him. 'Cause everybody tired, everybody busy, only got time to stop and stare. And everybody tired, everybody busy, you know they're forgetting. So run away, run away, run away. I said run away like the rest. Find away, find a way. For there has been so much loss. We don't need this, we don't need this, we don't need this now. So run away, run away. Passes by, gaze a while, and then fall to one side. They have a choice. These armies of a shaking, heavy hearted, you're mistaken, I will live without him. See, everybody tired, everybody busy, only got time to stop and stare. And everybody tired, everybody busy, you know they're forgetting. So run away, run away. I said run away like the rest. Far away, for there has been so much loss. We don't need this, we don't need this, we don't need this now. So run away, we bear two bones, but they see now past the skin. We bear to our bones, but they see now past the skin. Everybody tired, everybody busy, only get time to stop and stare. And everybody tired, everybody busy, you know they're forgetting. So run away, run away. I said run away like the rest. Far away, for there has been so much loss. We don't need this, we don't need this, we don't need this now. So run away, run away. Said run away, run away. Thank you.
Nice, yay! That was really good.
Thank you. It's much better than when you're doing your Instagram lives and then you just know there's people watching, but you know you can't hear anyone clapping.
I unmuted just to clap.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, have we got time for one more? I'm very aware that you guys are obviously about, to do professional things.
Yeah.
Okay,
please, if you can do one more, I think.
Encore.
I think we all need this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Has anyone ever sung to you guys in a Zoom meeting before?
No.
Warren and I have been on a lot of them. I don't think we've ever seen this.
No, but this is great. Let's do more of it.
I'm glad to deliver a first for you. I have actually sung in an office before. I sang in New York in the HBO office, and you could see people were sitting around the conference table kind of like, we love this, but it's so weird. So yeah, this is another track of mine called Promise We'll Never Grow Old. Tell you what, I am missing playing live shows, so this is a lovely in-between. Promise we'll never grow up, and the stars will align our way forth. 'Cause I can't bear the thought of you facing it alone without me. Let us vow to guard our youth, this treasure, all this hope it don't value. For lost has told how precious these moments truly are. For you've loved and you've lost too many a thing, but we'll keep him guided always. And up here, no one can harm us. And up here, forever young now. Promise we'll never grow up. Days grasp the fact that there's nothing that we'll lack. And innocence, you see, there is no way we can lose out. For you've loved and you've lost too many a thing, but we'll keep him guided always. And up here, no one can harm us. And up here, forever young now. Promise we'll never grow up. And up here, no one can harm us. Up here, forever young now. Promise we'll never grow up. Promise we'll never grow
Nice.
Thank you. Thank
I really
you
needed
so
that.
much.
Very good.
Thanks, Anna. That was a treat.
Oh, such a pleasure. Thank you for letting me join your meeting. And yeah, just everyone keep safe and stay at home. And obviously, Warren there's holding all the toilet rolls, so share that out, man.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Michael.
Yeah.
Thank you, Anna. It was great having you.
Oh, well, thank you. Take care, guys. Keep in touch. And yeah, hopefully see you at a show one day when I'm back in the States or wherever you are, Josh, a few miles away from me. Take care.
Thank you.
Stay well.
Hey, hi.
Bye.
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 Thank you.
I've been doing this for 3 years. I've never heard that. This is great. Good
What?
idea, guys.
Yeah, what a way to start it. Yeah, and thanks, Michael, for setting that up.
You bet.
Awesome. Well, hey, we can get started, I guess, with the business side of this stuff. For those of you who don't know who I am, I know we do have some new faces. I guess that's one of the benefits of having these virtual mugs. Takes away the geography boundaries, I guess, or barriers. My name is Jay Schoenwalder. I am one of the leaders of this Marketo user group, along with Kelly Trantow, who's also on the call here. You know, as we said, this is our first virtual mug. So excited to try this out, and you know, assuming all goes well, we might be doing more of these in the near future, which is great. You know, normally we'll have these either in the morning over coffee or evening over, you know, beer or wine. You know, whatever your beverage of choice is here today, no judgment. We're all at home, so do what you want to do. So real quick, I'm just going to kind of walk through, I'm going to share my screen, walk through a couple quick updates, and then we can get started. And then if we have time at the end, we can kind of go through and kind of do some networking, because normally we have networking involved in this, but you know, to squeeze that into in an hour might be a little tough. So we'll see how it goes. But you guys can see my screen, correct? I hope.
Yeah, you're coming through great.
Cool. Yeah, so just, you know, kind of goes without saying, but this is this should be a safe space for everyone on the call. This is a place for us to come and learn new things from each other. So, you know, shoot out your questions, shoot out your comments. This is definitely a safe space. This is not somewhere where you're going to be sold to or anything like that. And obviously, you know, if we share things about our internal processes, or you know, things that we're doing internally, you know, don't share that with others without their consent. This is also, you know, aside from our first virtual event, the first event we've held on the new mug platform called Bevy. So far, it's been really great. I mean, it's a huge step up from the Meetup platform that we used to use. Some limitations. I don't have total control over all of the automated emails that go out. So I sent out an email last night just making sure you all had the Zoom login. So that's great. It looks like most people got in without a problem. And if you're on the call, I assume you already logged into our chapter, but this is a new platform, and this is going to be the way that we'll communicate to everybody going forward for the Milwaukee Mug. One big thing to announce is the Marketo University. You know, this is like their online learning tool, is now free for everyone through the end of June, which is a huge gift from Adobe and Marketo. And I think, you know, what they're thinking is that, you know, with everybody being at home, maybe we have a little bit of extra time, maybe not. But, you know, what better way to kind of brush up on some skills and learn some new things. Michael, I don't know if you have anything to add on that, but definitely a good thing to check out.
No, I think.
Don't have anything to add. You're doing a great job. It's just a great opportunity with the you know, the free training, right? So take advantage of it. And then in addition to that is the Summit content that's out. You're getting ready to go into too, which is all live out there for your use cases. So good.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Thanks, Michael. Yeah. So obviously, you know, Adobe Summit, just like every other event, was canceled. But they did make all of the sessions available online for free. And there's a lot of good stuff out there. And what we're hoping to do today is with 3 of our local mug peers, Chrissy Johnson, David Lyons from GE Healthcare, and Katie Sharp from Alegeus. They are going to kind of share some of their main takeaways from the content in hopes that we can kind of provide a little bit of a highlight reel here. And maybe it'll give you some direction on which sessions to go back and do yourselves. So I guess with that, you know, first up is Chrissy. And Chrissy, I'll let you get started. You can kind of introduce yourself and go from there.
Sure. So hi everybody, I'm Chrissy. I work at Renaissance Learning. I'm actually located in Wisconsin Rapids. So it's nice that I didn't have to drive to Milwaukee today. But I kind of focused on looking at 2 sessions that Summit held that are more operational and how to manage your instance, keeping it healthy and available. And if you want to go to the next slide, the first one I started with was managing Marketo Engage for Growth, and really kind of jumped out at me because when you're first getting started with Marketo, you don't know kind of what you don't know, and it was like, if you could start over, what would you do again? Particularly if you have a large instance, to make sure that you're setting things up where you're not going to have issues come up, or you're not going to have to go back in and make large changes. This definitely has affected our org. We carry like 3 million contacts. So anytime there's an issue because we didn't set it up right, it's a big process. The first thing that they really talked about was managing your campaigns and how that impacts your performance in your instance. I think the thing that really jumped out at me there is the use of trigger campaigns, because even if like for an event registration that is only available or needed for like a month or 2 months, if you don't go back in and turn it off, it's still getting called anytime anything happens. So if you have a lot of those, it's going to slow down your instance. So going in, turning off campaigns that you don't need anymore. Really recommended using batch campaigns, maybe to do some of your updates. It's something that we've implemented. So like a title change, maybe instead of a trigger, you have that run nightly, and then it's going to be running once versus all day, kind of slowing down your system. Within that is also just managing your resources, trying to use flow steps, combining campaigns into a single one versus multiple campaigns. And really then this kind of ties into it as well of your smart lists, and making sure you're not using nested smart lists, because if you have a smart list that calls another smart list, basically the system has to process all of that instead of just maybe adding it to a static list. Just those little, kind of tricks that will help your system run faster. And then as your contacts or leads grow, it's going to make it a lot more scalable. Kind of within that leads is talking about lead management. So when you should delete leads, how to do it. The big thing that I took away out of the lead management is that if you just go into your database and delete a lead, it's gone. If, however, you have, you do it from a smart campaign and you delete somebody you actually didn't want to, Marketo can actually bring that back by the campaign ID, so that it's not totally gone. It's just a good way of giving yourself a double check, or if you accidentally delete out a lot of leads, you can retrieve those. And the last thing that probably affects a lot of people is managing your duplicates. Really getting a system in place to look at them weekly, monthly, whatever that is, because if you don't, you're going to come back 6 months, 9 months from then, and then it's just, over your head looking at, you've got, 20,000 leads, and how are you possibly going to get through that? The 3 main takeaways from that session are, paying attention to your filters and your flow steps and managing your campaign, managing your lead management, and then making sure, you're consistent across how you're managing your instance. And that's going to make it a lot easier to scale that up as your business grows or your instance grows. Then the next session that I talked about, and I want to go to the next slide, is really just kind of tied into that with, once you have your instance set up, how to keep it healthy. The main focus of this, right, is performing an audit, and why you should perform an audit, the benefits. It's really going to help you have that bird's eye view of what your instance looks like, what things you can change, what's working, what's not, and maybe you inherited an instance. It just gives you that overarching view. So the best approach to that is just going to be kind of going through and making sure you document everything. The session was really kind of broken into the three sections of Marketo. So within marketing activities, really going through making sure your folders are organized, you have consistent naming conventions. It's going to make life easier for you to find stuff, know when you can turn it off. Looking at your tokens, do you have universal, program level? You know, if you have something universal and you don't know it, it could be affecting things that you don't know about. Making sure you have your lead status campaigns. The big thing is going to be your lead flow. Like, go in and document, and I know I'm definitely guilty about not having this, but when you add somebody into your instance, what happens? Like, what triggers go off right away? Making sure you know that everything is set up correctly. Documenting your archiving process, reviewing your program templates, all of that. The big thing here is making sure you document it, because that's going to give you your action plan going forward of how to make any changes that you need to change. So if you want to go to the next slide here. Design Studio, going through that, pretty easy. Just organizing, making sure your templates are there, archiving anything that's old and not needed, making sure your snippets, if you're using them, are cleaned up and accurate. We tend to use a snippet for our footer, so always good to review that and make sure that you have the copyright year right or anything like that. The next big area is the database. Really important, since this drives your Marketo cost. So Karen recommended going through and finding kind of these categories of your total records, your marketable, engaged, how many are inactive, how many people you have without email, all of those, and then figure out what percentage of your database is in each category. This is going to help you kind of determine maybe what leads you can get rid of to get your database smaller, or who you might need to re-engage with. Looking at your email deliverability is a big part of performing an audit, making sure you have your A/B test documented, that your segmentations are set up correctly. And then they just really kind of provided a timeline of how often you should do some of this. So you should be looking at your emails and landing pages every 2 months, every 6 months, turn off and archive stale landing pages, smart lists that have been like a one-time use that are just kind of hanging out in your database, any static lists that aren't needed anymore. All of this is just going to help the system run better as well. And then really every 12 months, making sure you're looking at all your templates, your program templates, email templates, all of that. And then also reviewing the forms, because that's an area that can very quickly get out of hand if people are creating one-time use forms. And that was kind of it. They were both pretty interesting sessions. I think, looking at the audit one, it was a really good session for me of how to lay out an audit, because it can be a really daunting task. And the presenter just gave a really good overview to get started on that.
That's great. Thanks, Chrissy. Yeah, I definitely think, like, no matter how long you've been using Marketo, whether you're a new user or you've been using it for years, I think it's always good to just remember all these key components in keeping your instance healthy, and just making sure that you're giving proper time to each of these things. So it's a really good overview. Thanks a lot. And I should have said before Chrissy started, I do encourage, if you have questions or comments, please speak up. We can kind of keep this conversational. We don't need to wait till the end or anything like that. But yeah, next up, David Lyons from GE Healthcare. He's going to be talking about kind of a deep dive into some email algorithms. So,
yeah, hi. David Lyons with GE Healthcare, the marketing automation leader for US and Canada. I'm the admin for the database and the Marketo platform for US and Canada. Used to work with Jay.
Yeah. David taught me most of what I know about Marketo. So
No, but thanks anyway. So I chose this one topic because it's something that's been that interests me, in that we look at email performance reports. You get your clicks, you get your opens, and then off to the end is your unsubscribes. And I've always felt that there has to be a way that you can integrate the unsubscribes to actually tell someone how well is this really performing, without risking losing people. So this was called the Email Enlightenment Algorithm, presented by Abby Ryan and Sean Bissell. They're both with SAP Concur. Yeah, you can go to the next slide.
Okay, sorry.
No, that's fine. So what they presented was that we have existing data, and they said we have this way that we can improve the email reporting. So as I mentioned, they believe that email performance, the metrics can be deceiving. Does a higher click rate actually mean higher engagement, and how do the unsubscribes affect the engagement? So here they gave a couple of examples and walk through, which do you think actually performed better? And based on the math that they do behind the scenes, they came up with these metrics to show that, hey, this one that maybe you thought didn't perform as well, actually outperformed the email that we're comparing it to. So you go to the next slide.
All right.
So they gave 5 simple steps, or that appeared simple, which I thought was great. So the required data is readily available using Marketo's standard performance reports. So the 5 things you need is your performance report, a link performance report, a step that you need to take with the links is isolating the CTA links, and I'll talk about that in a second. There's a formula. As part of the formula, you have to divide your total unsubscribes by these the CTA link clicks, and then you just plug your numbers into the equation. So if you go to the next slide, they give the equation, which you can plug into Excel. I had some questions about, say, the order of operations, and I did reach out to them through the community, and I didn't get a response, which is somewhat worrying. But recognizing that they work for SAP Concur, maybe they're not really getting email at the moment to their work email. So so this I had to kind of figure out as I go along. So we're using unsubscribed data to calculate the score. I wanted some clarification, but I followed this as it was presented, and applied it to some of our data to see what can this deliver to me. So if you go to the next slide. So looking at the email performance report, if you want to use it for this in this particular formula, you can't use the out-of-the-box open click metrics because the percentages are formatted not as fractions but as integers. So you're going to have to apply some math one way or the other. You either have to divide that open percent or percent open value by 100, or just calculate that open percent yourself. So I like to just calculate myself, just in case I need to adjust any of the numbers. The calculations will all update rather than using the hard-coded percentage that you get out of your email performance report. So the next step, it's the next slide, is excluding the non-call to action links from the email performance report. That takes a little bit of doing. You can't do like write a smart list that says, you know, exclude these clicks on these links, because all that does is exclude people. It doesn't exclude those line items for those clicks. So it was pretty simple to identify which are, say, the links that we have in all of our footers, you know, links for privacy, Facebook, LinkedIn, et cetera, pulling those out. Another tool outside of Excel, if you're able to use it, I recommend using Microsoft Access and the query functions within there. It makes it very simple to say, look at this data set and exclude anything that's not like, or exclude anything that's like ge.com/privacy, et cetera, et cetera. So if I want to do this on an ongoing basis, I've already got that set up so that so what it spits out is the actual CTA clicks. So if you go to the next slide, this is what it looked like in Excel. This is just a sample, and I created a separate row for each step of the calculation, just so I could watch what it's doing. There's the pretty simple calculations there, you know, explains what those calculations are. The other thing I had a question about is what happens if you have 0 unsubscribed, because the algorithm breaks, because you come up with a divided by 0 error. So you can either just add these columns with these calculations to an existing export of a email performance report, or if you're familiar with it and like to do things like that, create a database in Microsoft Access with some queries that you can just simply replace the data source and have it calculate automatically for you. So I think this is the last slide. The next slide is the outcome. So how did that work out for us? It was enlightening to a certain extent. I do think it works. So one of these, the first one I've highlighted there, I see a large drop in the score. So this was the same email sent to the same audience 2 weeks in a row. I think the subject lines changed slightly, but these were all, this was an unengaged audience, and it looks like when you go from the first time you send it to the second time you send it, we're annoying people, because we obviously are seeing a greater amount of unsubscribe activity and less click activity. And without this scoring, as I would try and point this out to marketers, the response in the past has been, well, we can live with that as long as we're getting some clicks. That's all we care about. On the second one that I've highlighted there, we sent the same message to two audiences. One was highly engaged and one was unengaged. And the highly engaged, that was the highest scoring email that I looked at. So dropping down from 225 to 1.7, I think the recommendation there is, why are we sending the same messaging to these two groups of people? Let's focus on these the engaged and do something different, and maybe with less frequency to the unengaged. Try and move them into that category. One of the one I highlighted on the bottom there was for a webinar, and the interesting thing there is we had a higher score for the second time. So when we sent the reminder to register closer to the webinar date, so what we think we're going to do there is test whether we're sending invitations too far in advance. If we send them closer, maybe we will get a better response the first time out. So I really like this. Because I did set up everything within Access. I went and pulled this morning 2019 email performance and CTA click reports, and I was able to spit out an outcomes table like this for all of 2019 in about 10 or 15 minutes. So that's something that we're going to dive into and see if we can't talk some sense into some marketers in terms of how we may be annoying people in our database that we should be maybe communicating with less, or communicating with different messages.
Have your internal marketers been receptive to this so far, or have you not really run it past them yet?
Haven't really run it past them, because I just started looking at this, say in the last week, but I've shared it with our team, and we think that this will be very helpful, because some of the marketers do claim that they like data and they want to see data. So here's some data that they can chew on.
This is really interesting. I would be interested. I know we have the titles in here, but it might be a good follow-up to send links to these actual presentations, because from both, I'm like, ooh, I want to watch a glimpse of the actual presentation to get some of this additional, additional information,
Good point. We can send the links after this for sure.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. Awesome. Is that
That was it.
Okay, awesome. Thanks a lot, David. It's kind of crazy. We've all been looking at these email performance reports for so long. Who would have thought there'd be another way to analyze them? And if you thought you were going to get away from homeschooling your algebra student, you thought wrong. Awesome. So yeah, thanks again, David. Really big thanks. Next up is Katie Sharp from Alegeus, talking about a seat at the pivot table. So Katie, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Jay. Yep, so we can stay on this slide just for a few minutes here while I kind of preface what I'll get into. I started approaching kind of the summit data as I would like if I was physically attending the event. So kind of nitpicking some sessions relevant to my role currently. I'm marketing operations at Alegeus Technologies, which is a software company. And I come from a background of demand gen for software as well. So kind of shifting gears to look more at the operational and data tracks and stuff that I can really take back to my day-to-day. However, after digging into some of the content, I found myself resonating more with sessions that were a little bit more broad and strategic and kind of the themes that were brought up instead of just kind of the automation tactics and build out sessions. So that kind of got me here to a seat at the pivot table. And that this is based on 3 different sessions. So part of Sarah Kennedy's keynote, The New Era of Experience in B2B, specifically where Marissa DeKay was speaking on ABM, and then also B2B customer experience, out with the old and with the new, that has Danny Dalton from Adobe and some customer marketing representatives from Honeywell Aerospace. And then lastly, a session that was marketing operations specific, the best practices in marketing operations to earn a seat at the revenue table, where that kind of looked at different data points specific to the objectives of executives in different leadership roles at your organization. So all of that super interesting, and kind of developed some recurring themes in my mind that really stood out as kind of takeaways and just more thought-provoking than tactical in my mind. So I'm using the word pivot in the pivot table here playfully as I think about it in 2 different ways. Obviously, the pivot table in Excel, looking at different data points and kind of slicing and dicing information that way, but also pivot in terms of shifting with changes in the marketing industry and how we're developing through different experiences, engagements along the way. So you can go to the next slide. So the 2 recurring themes that kept being brought up, not just in these sessions, but in a lot of the sessions I watched thus far, were really hitting on a couple things. Obviously, a shift in the buyer's journey. I think this gets brought up a lot at these summits. I know like 2 years ago, HubSpot did the same thing with a funnel versus a circle now, like just thinking about it more from an experience and how those engagements are changing. And obviously, as technology continues to advance and people are having more and more touch points, what that looks like, especially for B2B marketers. And that also goes along with the second theme of account-based marketing now being account-based experience. So obviously, like from a company's standpoint, there's key people that are players in these conversations and these engagements, and thinking about it as more of that infinity loop of, you know, different touch points that they're going back to, they're hitting again. They're not necessarily like going through a full circle or going down a funnel. They're kind of weaving around different points there. So thinking about those touch points in the focus of that engagement experience, as well as the metrics around it. I think that's the big standout here, is we know that these engagements are shifting and the channels at which people are coming in are coming from all over. But I think the most important part there is to also change our reporting a little bit and adjust to that and those metrics we're looking at, so that, you know, we're understanding the right things and not just shifting what we're doing, but how we're doing it and how we're performing, and really getting our hands around that. And then also another thing that was brought up a couple times was focusing less on the volume of leads coming in. So I know, like, every company I've worked for, we have, you know, an inquiry goal, an MQL goal. We really want those high just to increase our chances of, you know, our SQLs and our wins. But shifting more around looking at the data of those targeted accounts, those people that are down the funnel, those people that are actual customers or, you know, close to where their journey has brought them, where they've came from, and what they've engaged with, I think is something that's important to think about and look at, but also something important for leadership to understand as those metrics are set and our reporting kind of changes and shifts with that more broadly used account-based experience. And I think, all of that really kind of goes along the same vein. So you can go to the next slide, Jay. For the one thing that I think that this obviously has in common is focusing on the person or company on the other side of the table. So when we're thinking about the account-based experience, we're thinking about the shift in the buyer's journey, where the buyer and the experience is of the person on the other side, and really putting yourself in their shoes and understanding who are the people that we want to go after, who are the players at the companies that we're looking at, how are they engaging with us, are they even engaging with us, and where can we really meet them at, or how can we get them to be interested and being engaged, and looking at data to tell us that. I think we sit on a lot of variables and data points that are so important, and we can go on and on about different performance metrics and how different things are being successful or not being successful, and continuing to kind of to practice on that and test and retest, but also kind of looking at those points of entry and what's really gotten people down and across the finish line, and what their preference is and where they're wanting to be reached, especially as the shift in the subscription economy is happening. It's important to leverage that information and to really kind of go after people and think about that in a different way than we have before. So I have slotted on here the image from the customer experience session that I mentioned. So they had like the past, the present, and the future. And the future is kind of embodying all of the things that I was talking about. So looking more at that lifetime value on the account rather than the cost per lead, alongside of those mass leads coming in. And then also leveraging artificial intelligence and bots in our MarTech stack, really understanding, those drill downs there on the targeted accounts that we want to be looking at, and doing more with less, as us marketers tend to have to do. And then obviously behavioral marketing is kind of, the nature of Marketo, and really understanding these touch points and building off of that. And he included, this was one of the representatives for Honeywell, the hyper personal, or the M2-1. And what this was it was basically in the same family as ABM, and just really drilling down into the data that we have in Adobe and in Marketo, and externally as well with our digital marketing efforts, social media, things like that, to be hyper aware and really personal approach, even from B2B. And I thought that was really interesting too from Honeywell, because I think of Honeywell like Honeywell Aerospace, probably, a company a few years ago, I would say would be pretty limited in my mind, in the experience they have from B2B, just based on the industry that they're in. But they've really shifted with the times and really taken a look at the data to gain insights and identify their opportunities to shift that journey and adjust their efforts there to continue driving and broadening their scope. Another they mentioned, and also was mentioned in some of the other sessions, was bringing science to marketing. As a marketing operations person, I think that's kind of what people lean on us for, is really that analytics and critical eye, but really leveraging those specific data points and making sure we're looking at the right information to be able to pivot those strategies and make a case for what's a best fit for our market and our customer base. I also think on this slide, like focusing on the person on the other side of the table, thinking about that internally as well. This can, like, I think about this on two different levels. I obviously just focus this on consumers and accounts, but if we think about it in the perspective of executives and leadership at our company and who we're reporting up to, we can use data to prove ourselves as a marketing or as our profit generating machine. I think a lot of times, you know, we have to do a lot with less. Marketing is thought of sometimes as like a cost center, whereas we want to be seen as a profit center, especially when the work we're doing is effective and is helping drive those sales and really give customers the experience that we're looking for, and are, you know, delighted in what we're doing and what we're offering them, and not just kind of, oh, you made a sale, move on and never hear from marketing again. So being able to prove how we're doing, how much we're doing, and be advocated for with the data points that we can use for each executive, and demonstrating that significant return. I think another side of that is consolidating the MarTech stack for efficiencies to be able to say that we're saving money as well, and not just kind of throwing things at a wall and seeing if it sticks, I guess. So kind of thinking about it a few different ways there. And I just thought it was kind of interesting to look at it through a few different lenses, because a lot of people, you know, are just focused or siloed in one department where, you know, they're just sending out emails, or they're just building landing pages and other performance things that we just want to get things out the door, but not really taking a step back to look at the bigger picture. So that's kind of how I thread all of this along, thinking about how we can use data to really come full circle and educating ourselves on what we're doing, what we should be doing, where our opportunities lie. And it just was something, as a professional marketer, it's just interesting to see how these conversations shift from year to year, and even from platform to platform, as I mentioned with HubSpot, kind of talking about a similar change in the experience. And I imagine that will continue as we gain more insights and technology continues to like build and build upon itself. So really exciting to see what happens there, and really be able to use kind of what Chrissy and Dave were talking about earlier with the different data points, like putting that into play, and be able to kind of accumulate that up to data points that I can then bring up to our leadership and really prove what we're doing and being effective. So that's what I have there. That's kind of what I saw, just my thoughts, my takeaways. During the sessions, they both the two people that were using Marketo used obviously Marketo, and then the Experience Cloud, which isn't something I've used before. So I'm curious if anyone has, or if they're using other tools that have been more insightful in these marketing efforts.
Just on the Adobe Experience Cloud, Amanda from the Houston mug, she presented a little bit on that at the beginning of her mug. So if you catch those slides, Amanda Thomas on the Houston mug has a bit about that if you're interested in learning more. Just thought I'd know.
Good to know. And my third slide, Jay, is just the links to the sessions I was speaking about.
Oh, cool.
So you guys have those there.
Thanks, Katie. Yeah, and we'll send these out after as well.
Cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks so much, Katie. I love what you said about, turning marketing, changing the narrative from being a cost center to a revenue generator, a profit center. I think that's something we can all get excited about and use the data that we have to, I guess, make us better, make our work more meaningful for the company and everything like that. So that's awesome. That brings us to the top of the hour. So if anybody needs to jump off, that's totally fine. If you want to just hang out and chat for a little bit, I'm open. If not, or either way, I think we should give Chrissy, David, and Katie a round of applause and big thanks for sharing those highlights.
Good job, guys.